So I'm just going to be doing form for you guys. It's going to be good because form also helps in assisting you with technique. Form helps you organize how to approach a technique, when your brush should be largest and when your brush should be smallest. Because when you know the value of the pre-paintings, when you know the value of not the pre-painting, the pre-brush strokes, those brush strokes that come first, the brush strokes that take care of the larger and the smaller shapes, the larger and the smaller values, the light values and the darker values when your brush should be large. That has a lot to do with technique. And if I were to just brush over this real quick, what I recommend to keep things painterly is to stay zoomed out. If you zoom in, you'll start detailing. Painterly is not detailing, so stay zoomed out. That's number one. Number two, address the largest brush strokes with yourself zoomed out, and make sure you don't shrink your brush until you know 100% that you have addressed all of the parts of the painting that need to be painted with this size brush. And after you keep yourself zoomed out, then even before this, you have to prepare your palette. And if you want, I know you were talking about a purple based palette or a cool based palette, prepare your colors beforehand. Just because it's painterly and it's messy doesn't mean the technique is messy. It doesn't mean that the process is a messy process and you're just generally disorganized. You can prepare your brushes at which stages. So you say 10 minutes in, I'm going to use this brush. 15 minutes in, I'm going to switch to this brush. I'm going to prepare that I'm going to prepare the fact that I'm going to prepare the sizes. So I'm going to make sure this brush is this size 30 minutes in and make sure that I shrink it. And it's only going to be like 10 by 10 pixels in the last 2 minutes of the painting process. Um, what else is there? Just because, again, just because it's painterly and it's messy looking doesn't mean it has to look messy. I mean, and it has to be done messily. It has to be, it can be organized, and you can organize every aspect of the painting process. That's pretty much all I can brush over for this. And doing form studies helps you know when to shrink your brush and when not to shrink it. So we're going to be talking about this odd shape, and I like how organic it is, but I do want to stress the fact that not to go into curved organic shapes before you've done the geometric shapes. The reason why I force all of you to do these form studies with polygons first, does anyone know why I could be suggesting the polygons first? Basically, why do I suggest, let me get mine up so that you guys can see. Why do I suggest the polygons? Can anyone tell me why I could possibly be suggesting them for you first before the organic shape? So hard edges and cubes before circles. Simpler and has distinct planes, absolutely. See planes better because you can simplify the curved forms to the polygons. Excellent. Blend edges, flat surfaces. Polygons have flat planes which make it easy to use or find a light source. Excellent, Jinx. Very well put. For lighting, that's good. Polygons kind of work for organics similarly. It's easier to see the values. Yes, there are edges. Absolutely, you guys are spot on. I don't think you even need me. So that's exactly why polygons are, when you think about the head shape, do you think about it being sphere shaped? Do you think it'll be better for you to understand 3 dimensions with the use of a sphere? I'm kind of losing my voice now. But when we think about the X, Y, and Z axis, what shape is better to illustrate the X, Y, and Z axis? The cube or the sphere? Which one is better for illustrating form? The cube, of course, because when you draw a head, so let's say you want to draw a 3D looking person's portrait. Let's say you want to paint a portrait and you want it to look three-dimensional and you want it to look cool and real. Which shape do you use? Do you use the sphere? Or do you use the cubic like shape? Which one do you use to make the head feel more real? The cube, exactly. So this is why I tell you to create polygons before doing the organic shapes. Don't think just because you can do the organic shapes that it's okay. This isn't a you're all special, we're all unique. We all have our own little, what's that, every snowflake is different. None of that here, none of that special stuff here. There's a specific route to take it because that's the best way to think about it. There's an actual organized order to approach all of this with. And thinking about the polygons first forces you to think about the underlying shapes and forces you to think about that beautiful z-axis to which we owe everything. Because that's the reason why this world is real. It's because of that extra third dimension. Everything is measurable in 3 dimensions. Volume, weight, mass. And that's what we're painting. We're painting objects that exist in the real world. And that's why it's important if you want to study and practice your rendering that really believes in a light source, a rendering that really anticipates a light source, it's better to start with polygon shapes. Okay, so I erased that said. Can anyone summarize what I said in a sentence or two? I know I've been asking you guys to summarize what I say, but I kind of want to keep it interactive. Can anyone summarize what I said? Then I'll get on to the paint over. The cube is better for interpreting form. Not just interpreting it, experiencing it in a study. It's better to as a form of measurement by which to measure your rendering ability. It's important for everything. Okay, so what I'm doing is just lassoing out your shape. Just trying to make sure that any painting that I do, I don't have to clean up too much. Because the reason why the lasso is so important in the form study process is because, you know, there's an edge. And what was replacing that edge? What do we usually replace our edges with? Can anyone know? Can anyone remind me? What do we usually, unfortunately, replace our edges with? Lines, yes. And so when you use the lasso tool, the lasso tool forces you to stop at a certain point. You can't paint outside of here. That's what the line usually tells you. We replace the silhouette of the form with actual form. The biggest part of form is not just the contour shadows, the light source, and the cast shadows. It's the fact that we have an object that has a limit and it only exists within itself. It does not hover and blend into the background. And that's why the lasso tool is so important for this. Alright, so where you place the light source wasn't really accurate. I feel like the light source exists, like if this was a room, the light source would exist somewhere out here. So imagine this big ball of light hovering in front of the paper. So it's somewhere in the top, it's like behind me. The light is behind me where I'm sitting right now on my desk, just above my head. I feel like that's where the light is coming from, but it's still casting a shadow down, so it's pretty high light. Highlight. And so what I'm going to do now is think about the core shapes, the core everything. So my brush is large. That's the key here. That's why I told you to think about technique with that painterly painting that we were trying, that you offered earlier. I don't know who it was, but it's important to keep your brush large because what it forces you to do is establish a really, really good light shadow spectrum. And what it lets us and forces us to do is create. Keep your contrast low, so I'm just going to brush over this. It allows us to, what was I even talking about? Damn, I'm like really bad memory right now. I really think something's wrong with my thyroid. It could be why I'm so sick all the time. Anyways, TMI. What was I saying? Need lines for shadows and much, what? I don't know. I forgot completely what I was saying. but yeah, keep your brush large. My train of thought I forgot, but I know what I'm talking about. I'm not 80. Okay, I'm trying to think about this is the front part of this little piece here. And you see these pieces are curved, and yet this little bit here isn't curved, so I'm just going to curve it. Don't do drugs. Hi, Noor. It's nice to see you here. Okay, so the light source is coming from here. I'm going to start thinking about some major cast shadows. So there's a cast shadow from this object onto this one that slowly tapers off into a gradient right over here. So there's a front part of this that is in cast shadow, which is right over here. This object, this bit, is casting on itself here, just like so. And what happens with cast shadows is they diffuse the closer they get to the lit area. And so let's bring this down one more time, contrast-wise, and bring in the highlighter. When you cast a shadow, there's a hot spot of the shadow, right? Right over here. That hot spot bleeds over into the actual cast shadow area. We've got some lit areas. Kind of an odd shape to work with. It's pretty awkward, but it's also interesting. But again, please go back to the polygons. For now, I do want you to think of, that's the point of the form studies, is that we're thinking about the cube. It forces you just for the sake, that's the beauty of it. It's a form study for the sake of form and nothing else. It's not a hat. It's not a vase. It's not some sort of still life. Still lifes are form studies just with a lot of extra stuff, and it can be very unfocused because you have to deal with material and color. But form studies are great because it's a really, really focused study on just the simple phenomenon of form. Light on an object. So areas that don't get touched by the light are the darkest areas, meaning this is a really, really dark cave-like area here. There's no reflected light, there's barely any diffused light and secondary light on it. There's also something of an edge here that you've created. So I have to make sure that edge is not blended. Just like this. And then I have to worry about this ball. So this ball's illumination, again, depends on its core shadow and its core light. So it's got the lower half of it as dark. And that's a given because that's the part that's opposite to the light. But it's also got this intense amount of secondary light source right here defining its edge. Just around this area. Sorry about the soft brush. I usually have lots of texture in my form studies. It also helps me develop techniques. So if you guys, it's another tip, if you guys want to perfect your technique as you do these form studies, pick a good textured brush that'll work as an obstacle for your blending. So it's so easy to blend with a soft brush, but if you have a textured brush, it'll slow down your blending process and it'll sort of maximize the requirement for technique. And it'll help you learn your way around that one brush, and you'll just fall in love with that brush after a while. So this area here is being diffused, and then we've got this dark edge over here traveling, again, opposite to where the light source is coming from. Now I'm going to get my dark darks, and I'm going to place them again only where I need them. My brush is shrinking in size. It can only shrink in size because, remember, areas of light and dark always come in small, what? Quantities. Maybe I should give you guys a chance to answer the question before I answer it myself. Then we've got another cast shadow coming off this object. It's a very, very strange object. I think it's going to be casting, yeah, just along here. But contrast is good for illustrations. Having low degrees of contrast, basically having low amounts of black and white paint doesn't mean you're not having contrast. It just means you're having contrast only where you need it. It's really good to use deep blacks and deep whites or high whites, but it's not good to use them everywhere. It's not good to depend on them. That's why I say use them only where you need them. So this area here is getting some light as well. And this cast shadow is being diffused, just like we diffused it on this side. Because that light is bleeding and reflecting back. And it's got a very, very small hot spot, just only where the light is reflecting in a perfect parallel line. I'm going to bring this down one more time. Get that light color. And again, just You see, I'm always bringing down the contrast, but bringing it back again, only where I need it. Very, very odd shape. Yes, just like bird poop. Don't use too much whites in your image or too much black, but mostly the whites because, yeah, they provide you with instant gratification contrast-wise, but it's too much contrast. Use it only where you need it. And so in turn, this ball starts to diffuse the shadow in this area here. So as you see, you have to always think about light as lines reflecting off of everything. Lines coming in this way, reflecting off of this to this, and this reflects up to this, and this reflects back here, so it's the hottest, brightest spot. And the lower you go, the less bright they get because this area is pretty much hogging all the light. It's all about thinking, if you think about it as a pinball machine and the light is the pinball, you'll always sort of imagine light as a line. It won't escape you that the light is a line. So here, a lot less contrast. The technique and the brush strokes and the texture isn't used as a crutch for rendering. And we're dealing with the core shadows and the core values so that we're actually getting an object that reads. And it's reading already without even us using a lot of contrast. So imagine if we start using the darker blacks in this area here. It kind of looks like this object can't really sit on a flat surface. I want to make it feel like it's actually sitting on a flat surface. It's just such an odd shape. Okay, and this cast shadow is continuing out across here. There is a small shadow coming off the ball as it sits on this piece of goat brain. We have to just make sure we're not losing this secondary reflection right here that's coming off this side. It's really important. Because again, we're representing light as a traveling vector that does not stop, and it has magnitude, it has strength, it has intensity. And that intensity slowly dwindles, but it still affects anything that touches it. So some of you, see this area is pretty much undefined in between the ball and this, might get a darker color. And this is a really good tip, so pay attention. Don't get a darker color and just start outlining this area here. Don't do that. That looks really bad because at this point you're outlining. You're trying to find the distinction between these two. Instead, increase your opacity all the way up. Zoom in a little bit and just create the cleanest edge in between both of them. And it will work as if you got a dark color. You're not. You're using the exact same colors. Did you see me use the color picker? No. Edges work like dark lines. If you have a sharp edge that's not blended, the contrast that's created with that is as strong as a dark line. What did I just say? Write it back to me. I want everybody to write it back to me. It's really, really, not really advanced, but it's something that you will pick up later on. If you don't pick it up now, but you'll eventually have to, and it'll be that moment where you advanced from like intermediate to advanced. I'm sorry I use complicated words. No, not contrast is line. Edge is as strong as a dark line. Yes. Edges equal lines. No. That's not the principle of what I'm saying. Plain rice has it perfectly. Good old plain rice. Edges between colors are as good as dark lines. If you're not blending, you might as well use a line because that's how good the contrast will be. A line is the epitome of contrast, black against white paper. a black pencil against white paper. It's the same thing here. If I want to make it an edge, I'm not going to get it and make the shadow darker. I don't need to. I have all my values in the right intensity. What I need to do is stop blending. Because sometimes there's a real legit edge that needs to be kept. And the further the shadow gets, the fuzzier it gets, because cast shadows don't stay sharp through their whole run. They dwindle off and taper off the further they get. Increase my brush. This whole area here is diffused because there's some light in the room, so I'm thinking of the room as a gray room. Yes, the background is influencing this object, so that's another thing to think about when you're doing these form studies. The background is as much important member of the palette and the color choice and the entire painting as the positive space. So it affects the light environment. And form studies are a study of light in an environment. Not environment meaning landscape, environment meaning an actual room where light is happening, an instance of light. So I'm just trying to make sense of this top shape over here. Bringing down the contrast one more time. I'm just bringing it all the way down, and I'm going to bring back the colors only where I need them. And if you've ever seen me do any of my paintings, you'll see I do this a lot because I'm always worried that I'm depending too much on the contrast instead of on the form. So what I do is I delay the contrast. So can anyone tell me what the benefit is of delaying the contrast? What does it force you to do as the painter? Delaying the contrast, what does it force you to do? You put it in places only where it's needed. Well, yeah, that's what happens when you do bring in the contrast, but what does delaying it make you do? Lines benefit. It's 3D form. To think more about form. Building up the form. Yes, building up. So that's a very key combination of terms in this case. When you're building it up, it means that you are addressing every grade of the gradient. So you're not jumping from medium gray to, okay, let's say the grades are in from 1 to 10. 10 being the darkest and 1 being the lightest. 10 to 1. You use the dark one, so you go to 10, you go to use the dark shade, and then you go to 9, and then you go to 8, and then you go to 5. And that's an overdependency on contrast. So you skip a couple numbers of grays, and you get to a number 5 gray, which is too light. You were at 8 before, and all of a sudden you're at 5. When you dim down the contrast, you're dimming it down. You're dimming that 5, but you're not really touching the 8s because you've used a value that doesn't really mess up the darker colors you already have in there. You just use something that darkens what you already have as light. So you're bringing that 5 down to a 7. And then you continue back to 6. All of a sudden you jump to a 3, dim it down again, and build a clean, organized build up of the gradient into the form. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm making sure that I have every level of the gradient considered. Do you guys see what I mean? Let me illustrate it in a diagram. I think that's sort of the best way. Let me get Gray's gradient. Image. Is there anything decent on Google? Okay, I guess I can use this view image. Fuck, image is not available. Wow. Typical. View image. Son of a bitch. View image. Why? Damn it. Just one second, guys. I'm sorry. Just want to make sure this is really, yes, there it is. View image. Yay. Okay, so basically what I mean is sometimes we like to skip grays when we paint. So we have, so far let's pretend that our drawing has this color in it, this color, but all of a sudden we brought this color all the way down here suddenly. That's too much contrast too soon. What happens is when you bring in a dark tone that you already have and brush it over, you've darkened it down back to where it needs to go. Sometimes it's the opposite way. Sometimes you work light to dark. So you have this tone, all of a sudden you brought this shade in too soon. And you've got a dark that's this dark in a painting that's only this light so far. Forget this no man's land crap. What is that shit? Get out of here. Nobody likes you. Okay, so you've got this dark too soon, so you're going to bring this color. Brushing in this color on low opacity isn't going to affect any color. That isn't going to affect the color you already have. It's just going to lighten it back up to where it needs to be on the scale. That's what I mean by constantly diffusing your contrast, so you don't go too dark too soon. Contrast is either light or dark. Sometimes you bring in those darks too soon or those lights too soon, and you really affect your form buildup, your stairway. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm really benefiting from this because look at this now. I'm bringing in a dark shade. I'm not going to use all of it, but I'm going to bring it only where I need it, and I'm going to shrink my brush as I lay it in. And it's starting to feel more three-dimensional because I'm really thinking about, I'm really thinking about how to build up, how best to avoid high contrast and make sure that I'm building up and addressing all the grays possible in this light room, in this light instance, in this light situation. Do you guys see what I mean now? Layers, who needs them? I do. So that's the best way to render. If you've been diagnosed by me or another artist that you have too much contrast, that's how you do it. That's how you fix it. You fix it by constantly defusing your contrast, constantly bringing down the grays you've chosen and replacing them with the next best gray. Okay, so this shape needs some sense made of it. So I'm going to make some sense of this shape. I'm going to make this circular part start later. I'm going to make these areas here a little flatter. Oh shit. Okay. So it seems like they're sitting on top of a desk or something. So it seems like this sculpture can actually stand on its own. Because I'm applying real life light to it, so I want to make it seem like it'll sit. And then this piece here I'm just going to flatten out and cut off. I'm going to create a nice little steepness here that builds up this way. Okay, and then I'm going to sort of sharpen these little bits and then bring that circle back. Sorry, I didn't look at the screen when I said. Do you guys see what I mean about the gray buildup? Do you guys see what I mean? do you guys see what I'm talking about? Sorry, I'm just a perfectionist. I want to make sure I really get the message across. Yeah, kind of? Why kind of? Why not absolutely, Istebrak? Give me a sticker. Why kind of? So class, what did she mean, class? How about you answer, Tukos? Okay, so again, I'm just bringing in my shades only where I need them. This little bulge here, I want it to make it feel like a little bulge. So this has a little darkness to it, a little sort of cave, and it builds up. And these darker areas here can't be that dark because guess what? The ground or the surface is diffusing them. So the very, very ends of this are going to be grayed out because the ground is reflecting light off of it. And I'm just going to keep, again, bring my values dark one more time. Maybe I need to diffuse soon. I don't know. I'm going to have to decide. Yes, Sybil, if you have a question. Is the streak of light on the claw-ish projection, is that original light that goes past the projecting triangle? What? Is the streak of light on the claw-ish projection, that thing, is that the original light that got past the triangle? Yes. So you mean you mean this little thing here is the cast shadow from this. This is casting a shadow on this. So the light is traveling this way. It's a good question. You see, you have to make sure you diffuse your cast shadows, or else they don't look right. I'm just thinking about the light one more time. And this whole area here is being exposed to the light. So I'm going to have to diffuse this whole area and bring in this white contrast, which is a bit too high actually. I'm going to bring it down again one more time. And the highest point, the brightest peak of this area, just like the cheekbones. You see, remember the cheekbones, how I teach you guys to shade cheekbones? This area here, you shrink your brush the more white you put, because you want to make it feel like that's a high point, like the nose tip. Okay, and if we keep rendering this, if I'm going to be here for another hour with you guys, it'll look like a real sculpture soon enough. Because after we've addressed all the texture and the actual light and the diffuse, and we've worked with the contrast and the secondary light source, it'll feel like a real sculpture because we thought of light as a line, and we thought of the sculpture as a dense object, and we thought of the sculpture as governed by the z-axis and the cube. All of that stuff will always ever result in a 3D object. That's all 3D modeling is. X, Y, Z, pivoting, adding a little bit of polygons here and there so it doesn't look like you have a bunch of flat surfaces everywhere, so everything curves. And then you've got your light source that you apply at the very end. Or you have a light source to begin with. So this actually travels all the way across. Still trying to figure out this shape, what this shape is. You just have to take it core shadow by core shadow. You take it piece by piece until it starts to look right. And when it looks right, basically, that's just an instinct that you grow. You know, it's not good advice for me to say, do it until it looks right. That's not good advice. Basically, what I mean is, make sure that you've applied all the knowledge that you have on the subject. It'll eventually match. It'll eventually start to serve you the way that knowledge is supposed to, what that knowledge is supposed to result in. So you will eventually find that you've created something that looks realistic. And your feedback, the feedback from your viewers, feedback from, people who follow you, it will all start to read to them because you follow these rules. So when I say until it looks right, I mean until it looks realistic enough for your taste. So again, that's different for everyone. But it'll look realistic though, that's for sure. And it'll be your choice when to stop. So the way you did it before, it wasn't really focused. There wasn't one light source. You see, I'm thinking about a light source that's causing all of this, that's responsible for all this mess. It's in my head, it's floating right above this object, and it's constantly throwing out lines of light. This area here needs an edge. This area here needs an edge. I'm going to diffuse one more time. Literally just going to get the mid-tone, throw it over, and bring down the opacity. Okay, and I'm just going to erase away what I don't need because I don't have a lot of time left. Just bringing in those highlights only where I want them. I'm going to erase away the dark. Bring it only where I want it. And keeping your grays, what's the importance of keeping your grays high? Like, what's the importance of working with low contrast? Does anyone know? If you're working with grayscale, why is it important to work with low contrast? This form is now diffuse. So you don't jump values too early. That's how you do it. That's how you work with low contrast. How do you not work with low contrast? Don't jump values too early. Keep diffusing. But what does it help? Because you can't color black or white. It makes you sexy? Yes, octopus. It makes you sexy. Nutriman is right. When you put in the colors, you're not going to be able to add any colors on dark grays. Have a video on this. It's actually, I'm really proud of that video because I did it on a good day where I didn't have a cold or anything. I think I did have a cold, damn. But I pretty much just, I focused all my energy on explaining why it's important to keep your values light. Let me just get that video for you guys. That video. And I just explained exactly what I mean when I say avoid those dark grays. So where is it? Portraiture. Okay, contrast, critique hour. God, Istebrak, do you ever quit? Okay, where is it? Lighting, face, anime, elf, surfaces, and anime rendering, basics on 3D cube, organizing composition, form study, time lapse. I did not delete that video, did I? Oh, there it is. Okay. How to properly transfer grayscale to color. Here you go. This explains why it's important to keep your values down. Your grays sort of mid-tony. Sorry, that's just my stupid, I get workout music out of that. Yeah, I know you're useless. I know that. I know you're very useless. I know. Okay. So before diffuse, after diffuse. So you see we're using the grays only where we feel like we need them. We're not just throwing them everywhere. It's really important to always remember that you don't need that much contrast for the form to read. And everything seems to be balanced, and if you do want to up the contrast by Photoshop edit, at this point you can, because things seem to be at a balanced spectrum. So they'll darken in an equal way. No light area will be too dark too soon, because you've taken care of the fact that there is light in areas that are exposed. Again, this shape is really weird. It kind of threw me off. It was a good-ish study, for me at least. But remember, please stay to the polygons for now. The point of these form studies is threefold: to perfect your rendering, to perfect your technique, and to keep you thinking about the cube. Just trying to imagine where these shadows exist. Probably a little bit more this way. And it will curve off. I don't know. I'm not a 3D modeling program. So I'm not sure I know exactly what I'm doing with this cast shadow, but I'm doing my best. Merge down. The cast shadow is darker, sharper, where it gets closer to the object, and more tapered off, the further from the object that it gets. So let's do that. Let's lighten the shadow the further it gets. And then filter, blur, Gaussian blur the whole thing. And sharpen it only where it's closest. So it gets sharper the closer it gets over here and over here. But then it starts to taper off toward the edges. Darker there, and then tapered off. And generally much lighter. Okay? So all of that is stuff to think about. The light source, where the light source is. So if we were to make these notes as notes, how do you do a form study? First, you have to absolutely imperative know where is your light source. So where is the light source? All right? Is it intense? What is its magnitude? What is its intensity? What is its direction? And what kind of material are you painting? So the form. What is the form? What kind of form? So the kind of form that you're dealing with. Is it a rock? Is it silk? Is it a leaf? Is it feathers? You have to understand exactly how that object is composed so you know how to deal with that object. Feathers are a bunch of tiny little hairs. Rocks are completely opaque and very unforgiving, so their shadows are pure dark. There's no light going through. They're not transparent. Where is the cube? So the material. And then where is the cube in all of this? And when I say where is the cube, all I mean is where is the z-axis. Alright? And then after that, it's just a matter of thinking about the light as lines. And that's at the end because I don't want you to think about the light as lines too early because then you're going to start diffusing too early. Whereas the light source equals core shadow. Core shadow is the most important shadow to deal with first. Don't try to bring in secondary light source too soon. So light as lines. And at this point you bring in the secondary light source, which could be diffused from the ground, which could be a secondary little candle here, casting some light, illuminating this edge. Alright? So that's a lot of stuff to think about, but it did bring out a more three-dimensional looking object. So imagine applying all of this to a face. Imagine applying all of this to armor. Imagine painting a horse. You'll deal with the horse a lot easier. It will not be a stressed out looking horse that you draw. It'll actually be a pretty laxed horse because the process will have organized your approach. And you'll have something that reads a lot better than what you had before. Let me just sharpen because I used the evil soft brush. Filter, sharpen more. That's way too sharp, holy shit. Alright, never mind. Alright, so before, after. The defusing helped us build up. It seems like this is actually sitting on something. It seems like this object is actually sitting on a surface and is casting some light. So all of that is important. Diffusing your value and your core shadow, all of that is important to helping making something look real and helping to create the instance of light, the light environment. Before, you were depending on contrast and texture to render something, otherwise very unreadable. And then after. This is exactly what I want you guys to do. Of course, choose a better brush than what I chose. Choose some polygons. Please remember to choose the polygons. It's very important to choose the polygons. And let's take a look. Let me prove to you how important these form studies are. I'm going to look at some of my older form studies and I'll show you how I've improved. Stupid ass gallery. Yalla. Alright. So I used to be really gung-ho about my form studies. I thought I was just the shit for doing them. I didn't realize all the mistakes I was really making. So this is my latest one. This is my first one, and this is my latest one. What do you see as a comparison between the two? What is the biggest improvement? What is the biggest change that you found in between these two? What did I depend on before? Less contrast, exactly. I was panicked. I was like, oh crap, I need a cube. Look at how much the dark this has. Look at the dark here. Look at the dark on this tiny ass little triangle. It's supposed to be diffused completely. And yet it reads as a much more sophisticated form structure in this image. Even though I see a lot of mistakes. I don't mean to blow my own horn either. Ew, look at my sophisticated art. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that there's a lot to learn in one form study about what you are as an artist with technique, with rendering, with your knowledge of light and shadows. That's what it is. That's what drawing is. It's just knowing how to apply light and shadows. And that's the biggest thing. The shapes are a lot more intriguing. I had more courage with my shapes. I had more courage with my cast shadows. Look at these cast shadows. There's no courage with them. What's causing this weird little book thing anyway? And I depended too much on those little grooves to give the object intrigue. I was bored by the cube. So I didn't have an appreciation of the cube. A lot less grooves here. And just more cube all around. Ignore the naked ladies. I also understood depth a lot better. So over here, this rock is far away. This triangular place is further away than here, but it almost has the same value contrast as the object that's in the focal point, which has the most contrast. Objects in the background are diffused completely. They have atmospheric fade. And yet I didn't apply it here. This has the same contrast as this, which has the same contrast as this. And these three objects are not in the same planes. Look at this here. Look at that contrast. What the heck, man? You guys should not be listening to me as your teacher. I made some horrible mistakes. And this was a year ago, done at the exact same time. So when did I upload this? March, and then I uploaded this in April. So yeah, almost a year apart. Year of sort of rendering. It's not that I didn't do it every day for a year. That's a long time before you see improvement. No, I just did it like I didn't do any form studies between these 2 points. This is the only time I did form studies in those 2 years, and not a year apart. If I had done form studies every day, I would have improved a lot faster, but that's the point. Okay? Form studies are important. Build your contrast. Build your structure. Build your gray tones. Don't go contrasting too soon. If you do, there's a fix for it. Diffuse it a little bit. Bring in some intriguing shapes. Bring in some intriguing looking objects. And please, please, please use some cubes. Remember the cube and the z-axis. That's what's going to keep it looking realistic. The z-axis makes you think about this man standing here. The z-axis takes him from here to standing behind the rock, sneaking. Alright? That's what the z-axis gives you. It gives you depth. Alright? This makes this look real. Let me get rid of that line. Your object can have a horizon line. It can have a horizon line in the background somewhere. I'm having too much fun with these words. Alright? That's what the z-axis gives you. Those perspective lines, those are all a z-axis. Just bring in an x and y map, and those are all z-axes. Okay? That's what the z-axis does. It makes you feel like if I got a piece of tape and a little girl with a piece of chalk. I had a piece of chalk and walked around. See how like I do gender norms? I'm so horrible. She had a piece of chalk and she was running it across. That piece of chalk will eventually go behind where we can't see it, so it'll have a 3/4 view. So that's the 3/4 view knowledge. The fact that there's no ear visible on this side means that if you were to draw a face, that ear wouldn't be visible because the piece of chalk is behind now. I know that sounds like it makes no sense, but it'll make sense to you eventually. Just do some form studies. Don't wait until the next time you do a masterpiece before you experience some form. Don't wait until the next time you do a still life. Still lifes are a waste of goddamn time because you're going to be dealing with color. You're going to be dealing with the fact that it's still life. You're going to be dealing with, if you're doing it traditionally, paint. So just do the form study for Pete's sake. That way when you do a still life, you'll be able to approach it with a lot more organized mindset. You're going to fumble 85 times before you get it right with a still life, but you're going to fumble like what, 3 or 2 times on a still life that's in a safe environment, a closed environment where you can study the form for form's sake, not form for form's sake. I'm thinking about steak. Form for form's sake instead of form for the sake of a vase or the sake of your grade 12 art teacher. I hate all my grade 12 art teachers except Mr. Dansinger. I love you, Mr. Dansinger, if you're watching. You're my inspiration. But the rest of you, meh. Yeah, I said it. Thank you guys and have a great day. Bye-bye.